just wanted to thank you for allowing me to come and speak about something that I'm very passionate about, and that's children. I've come today to talk to you about adopting a new way of working, and it's to get adult workforce really to start to think differently about how they actually support people with MND, ALS. If I explain first of all that my background is actually nursing, predominantly paediatric nursing, so I've spent the majority of my career working very closely with lots of services in the children's workforce that support children. So that's health services, social care, emotional and mental well-being services, advocacy, and a little bit with education for children that have long-term conditions. I think when I'm coming to speak to you today, it's really to say that actually quite often organisations like ours often focus on individual care, so they focus on the person with the condition, so the disease, and their carer, and quite often forget about the wider family. In fact, our association members actually felt that there was a gap in our provision for families, so we wanted to find out what we could do in order to change this. So what we'd like to deliver really is a better service, and what we needed to consider first of all was how our professional practice might have impacts on a child or a young person in the family. So we're thinking about, what does this mean, what do we do, and also our knowledge of local services, so that's the children's workforce, and actually information that we provide that supports children affected by MND and ALS in a family. So what we need to find out really was, how do these services work? How do we provide information to those services about what MND actually is? And how do we make referrals to those services, and how do families actually access those services? So why bother? Well, at the beginning of my role, I'm actually seconded from the helpline at the association. I actually did a little bit of scoping just to see how much we actually knew about families that have actually got children, and actually we didn't know very much at all. So we weren't really aware of the numbers of children and young people affected, and that's not just talking about children in families where a parent has MND, but also children in families where a grandparent has MND or another close relative, because you'll have children that may be very close to that person. We didn't know how many of those children and young people are actually providing care. So in the UK, I don't know if the term is the same across other organisations, but we call them young carers or young adult carers. So we weren't actually aware of how many of our children and young people are actually providing care. We weren't aware of the local services available across the country, and obviously for our association we cover 3 countries, England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and our health and social care services are set up very differently across those 3 countries. So we weren't aware of the bereavement services, whether we could access pre-bereavement as well as post-bereavement services, what services are available for young carers. And also, what was quite apparent was actually the people that completed our survey, and that was our care centre coordinators, our volunteers and staff, that actually our members of staff actually aren't aware of all of the range of resources that we had available. We also didn't have everything all in one place, so it's quite difficult for staff to actually come to those resources. So I also actually spoke to some families to find out what their views were, because obviously members were telling us that we weren't doing enough. So I wanted to find out how they actually felt, and many families felt unsupported. They felt very isolated and felt that they were the only family where a parent had MND or a grandparent had MND. They weren't aware of anybody else. They were also unaware of any help that was actually available, particularly for children in the family. And they also felt that more could be done to support them. In talking to families, I did it in a number of different ways. It was actually speaking to families face-to-face, by telephone interview and also via email. So actually, if we look at research, we already know that in terms of mental well-being, for young carers particularly, children and young people are less likely to develop problems with mental health and mental well-being later on in life if early support is given. So when we've been talking this morning about voice banking and voice messaging, message banking, we're thinking about that happening early on, and the same thing really relates to children and young people in the families. That actually, if they have access to services early on, then actually we can prevent some of these problems appearing later on in life. We also know for children that are providing care that actually lots of services often fail them because children are hidden. Many children are just not known to be providing care. And certainly for our families where somebody has MND, if they've taken a long time to get to a diagnosis, then actually children and young people in the family may already be providing some level of care, whether that's emotional care or physical support, actual care tasks for a person. So they quite often are, unsupported, they're not noticed, they're ignored. They often go without having an assessment of their needs. So they often don't have a young carer's needs assessment, which is done in this country to look at respite and actually young children and young people actually having a normal childhood. They're also academically more likely to achieve lower grades, and that can be a combination of different things. That can be due to fatigue if they're a young carer, lack of concentration at school because they're worried about the person with MND, their care responsibilities and just the huge weight of the responsibility placed on them, absence from school if they're attending an appointment. For somebody that's got no communication, a young person might be attending an appointment to actually speak on that person's behalf, so they may be absent from school, so they're missing out again. They're more likely to be out of work, particularly when you're thinking about young adult carers, which range from age 16 to 25. They're likely to become the carer for the person. So they could be out of work, out of any sort of training or education, which means that later on in life, they don't have the same chances as other children and young people. Children also have rights, and quite often you'll hear parents or some of our volunteers or our staff actually talking about children's rights to have information about a parent with MND or a grandparent with MND. Do we tell a child that a parent has a disease such as MND? And parents' instincts are to protect a child, but actually children's rights are paramount, and actually they override any rights of adults. And so we need to think about circumstances, and we need to be aware. This is just one of the pieces of information that looks at the rights of a child, the UN Convention of the Rights of a Child, but there's many more. And certainly in England, we've got the Children and Families Act, we've got the Care Act, we've got the Children's Act 1989. So there's lots of things that actually support children's rights. And it's important that children have information about decisions or situations that would directly affect them. And actually, I would argue that having a parent with MND is a situation that's going to directly affect a child. So actually, they should have rights to information about what's going on. They also need, obviously, protection from harm. And that's not just thinking about physical harm. So a child that's actually providing support with a hoist, for example, that could actually have an injury to their back, which is going to cause a long-term health effect for the young person, but it's emotional well-being as well. So actually having access to information so that you're not worrying and causing some mental health issues later on in life, things that are unresolved. Also, where you've got people with cognitive changes, or frontal temporal dementia, obviously there's a high risk for a child in that environment. Children have a right to receive services to support them to reach their full potential. So that's for children to be the best that they can be in every area of life. And also support to maintain and build resilience. Children are very resilient, but we need to provide services that allow them to build that resilience and actually come to terms with what's happening to them. Because children think about themselves, particularly young children. It's about the effect on them as a person. So what we needed to consider really was, what does good look like? And what we're looking at is a whole family approach. So it's actually thinking about how we can improve the understanding of the impact of MND, ALS on a family. So it's not just thinking about the person with the disease and the main carer, which is usually an adult. It's thinking about the wider family. And with a person that has a grandchild that might be popping in and providing care, so coming in and doing the shopping, opening bills, telephone calls, that young person's actually providing care as well. We need to think about how we can actually reduce the sense of isolation for all family members, provide better information for all ages, and it needs to be fit for purpose, and also improve access to the services that we already provide. So it's really thinking about how we can actually consider children and young people in all of the things that we do. So this is just just a very small example of a tiny little change that we made, and that was just going on to using social media. And I'll just read this quote out to you. Just to say, we had a new family come to our drop-in last week as a result of one of your tweets. They'd been looking for some pre-bereavement support for a while, so it was great that they found us. Thank you. I can't tell you how relieved this lovely family were to find us. Now, this is a result of going onto Twitter and actually retweeting anything to do with children's bereavement services, children's mental wellbeing services, children's young carer services, and actually using the hashtag MND, so hashtag ALS MND, because that's actually highlighting to those services about MND, but also highlighting for our audience services that are actually available to them. And this is actually a children's bereavement service that do a regular drop-in in an area, 2-hour drop-in, and they can actually signpost the family to a face-to-face service or actually provide support. So this is actually the model that we've actually been using. And it's really thinking about how services are set up. And you notice I've put the person with MND, ALS in the centre, and actually for our association, we believe that the person with MND is at the heart of everything that we do. So it's really important for us that we still keep them there. But we're thinking about family around them, and then statutory services in the voluntary sector, children and young people services, so the children's workforce, and actually how we can improve awareness of MND with children and young people's services and actually help people with MND and their families access those services. So these are some of the things that we've done, and if you notice, all the little pictures on the slides are actually from this book, which is our new information guide for children and young people, which is available via a web app as well as a hard copy, and you can download it. We've got a new guide that's coming out this month, which is for the children's workforce. So it's for anybody working with a child or young person under the age of 25. And we've specifically gone for under 25 because you'll have young people transitioning from children's services to adult services in their education. So it's really important that those adults providing support for those young people actually have an understanding of what MND is and the impact. We've got dedicated web pages now, so 4 separate sections for young people to go to. We have regular updates and articles in all of our members' magazines and newsletters. We've got young people's grants, so each young person in a family that's affected by MND can access a grant for an enrichment activity, for example, a young person to learn how to drive, or a young family to go to Legoland as a memory-making opportunity. We've increased social awareness by using social media, Facebook, Twitter. We've improved our information for professionals, so we've included thinking about children in the family within those pieces. We've got a Christmas card competition, I'm whizzing through now, which is helping children to have a shared experience, which is very important for children. They like to feel that they're part of a group, so they're not on their own, so that reduces isolation. We're supporting national schemes, so Young Carers Awareness Day, International Children's Grief Awareness Day. We've got a Young Connect helpline, so you can email in, children can actually ring our helpline and speak to an advisor. We've been supporting volunteers to run family events, which are fun events. We've got reading lists, which are a list of books that can be used to support early conversations about loss, death and dying, and look at how to manage emotions for all different age groups, and it includes children with additional needs. So those are some of the things that we've done. And what I truly believe, is that actually by reducing stress and anxiety for a parent, particularly that's got children, has MND, actually if we're able to provide that support for children in the family, we're reducing stress and anxiety for a person with MND, and actually that will hopefully improve quality of life overall for that person, and also help reduce the impact of MND. So these are my take home. I need to whiz on because Steve's looking at me now.
Time has gone.
So my time's gone. And that's me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So we probably do have time for just a couple of questions. So do I see any hands anywhere? Any questions in the audience? Yep, one down here. Okay.
More of a comment. I just thank
Could you stand up and say
Absolutely.
who you are and where you're from?
Rebecca Axline from Houston, Texas.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank you because I know we all share resources all over the community, and we often have families that are, desperately looking for information to help their children and the families. And so using these and being able to share them with our families will be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anywhere else? No, we've one over here.
I thank you. My name's Kyle from Connecticut. You mentioned that there is an assessment for the children. Is that a formal assessment that can be shared, or is that on an individual counselor?
I know in the UK we have two assessments. There's an early help assessment which is done by by the local authority, so by social care, and that looks at children that potentially may become young carers. And then we have another assessment called a young carers needs assessment, and that looks at what the young carer needs to achieve their full potential. So it's looking at every aspect and what the family actually needs for support. But I don't know if that's the same across other countries. I don't know what's in place for your area, so it'd be useful for your organisations to actually find out what's available for young people in your area. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Please join with me in thanking Karen once again.